राम नाम से महकती हैं कलियां अयोध्या की। राम नाम में लीन है गलियां अयोध्या की। अयोध्या में प्रभु श्री राम का हर रंग है निराला। करती है हवा भी रंग बिरंगी अटखेलियां अयोध्या की। अयोध्या नगरी ने बदलाव तमाम देखे हैं। वन को आते और वन को जाते श्री राम देखे हैं। भारतवर्ष में जन्म होना भाग्य की बात है, बट अयोध्या में जन्म होना सौभाग्य की बात है। The Ayodhya saga is timeless. The city's historical context, the characters involved, the tragedies and the victories linked with it will always remain fresh in the minds of Indians. My name is Meenu Agrawal and I am your host for the event. Delhi Literature Festival was founded in 2013 with the primary goal of promoting writers and their work, as well as cultivating an appreciation for literature and writing. 9 years of Delhi Lit Fest have seen a wide variety of speakers from across the globe participate in book reading, book launches, and panel discussions. And as a public event, it's really a festival for everyone. We will have a plethora of writers and authors coming to you live in this Delhi Lit Fest virtual avatar during this 10th edition, which spans 6 days from 18th to 27th February. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Vodafone India, Vodafone Idea, Media Partners NewsX, DLF Malls, and LIC of India, हर पल आपके साथ. Our social media partner, Koo App and Blossom Coacher. The number of books on Ayodhya is a pointer to the attention latter day controversies have attracted. Our next session today is with Neena Rai, Amazing Ayodhya, the splendid ancient city of Lord Rama, author Neena Rai in conversation with Samriddhi Goyal, news anchor DD News. Author Neena Rai is an author and an artist based out of Delhi, India. She is passionate about writing and understanding the wisdom contained in the Hindu scriptures and magically makes ancient and esoteric information understandable and relatable. Her vision is to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people across the globe by decoding ancient wisdom and esoteric information so that the common man is able to comprehend it. Moderator Samriti Goyal is a charming personality and a TV presenter at DD. This will be a 45-minute session followed by an audience Q&A for 10 minutes. Kindly do write in your questions and comments in the chat box below. Let's welcome Neena Rai and Samriti Goyal.
Well, thank you very much, Meenu, for that fine introduction. Thank you once again. And like Meenu said, I am today here with Neena Rai. And Neena's latest book is on the amazing city of Ayodhya, the splendid ancient city of Ayodhya, as she's showing to you. And see, I have my copy here. And we'll talk about the book over the next 45 minutes, like Meenu said. So, without wasting any time, because I have like this long list of questions that I'd like to ask you, Neena, to begin with. When someone hears Ayodhya, I'm sure, like the common man, the first thing that to most of us, what it will strike us is that okay, maybe it's just another book on the controversy surrounding the Ram Janmabhoomi and what's been in the news. So, what is your book about? Is it the same? And if it's not, how is it different? Tell us about that first.
So one of the reasons that I wrote this book on Ayodhya is because I was exhausted by only the controversy that surrounded Ayodhya. So it was as if Ayodhya never existed, and just as the controversy hit Ayodhya, and that is in when the Babri Masjid Dhacha was taken down, that's when Ayodhya actually came. So before that, nobody knew. Even before that, nobody knew. And so I was growing up at that time, and I was like, don't you know this? Don't you know? So for people who knew a little bit, they were like, wow, we're in a world where people have no idea why Ayodhya gravitates so many people towards us. Like, for example, we now won the case in Ayodhya, and the lawyer who won the case for us, he was a devotee and he did not wear shoes in the courtroom. So that is the kind of level of devotion that people have for Ayodhya. And if you ask the common generation, they're like, do you know why? They're like, no. And it's like, why would they do that? So if you read my book, it stems from trying to fill that gap. It stems from the fact that I have traveled the world. My father was a diplomat. It stems from the fact that if you go to Bethlehem, there are a plethora of books on Bethlehem, which is the birthplace of Christ. If you go to Mecca, Medina, if you go to any of these holy places, you'll have a plethora of books in English for the whole world to read. They're exhibited in they're everywhere, even in the museums. If you go, or even if you go to the embassies, you'll find these books. But Ayodhya became such a big name, such a controversy. There was nobody who could tell us in modern day, why was Ayodhya famous? What was so special about Ayodhya that Hindus kept fighting for hundreds of years? What was so special about Ayodhya that Babri thought he had to demolish it? If he didn't demolish it, he wouldn't win victory on Hindus. He was not able to convert the Hindus. So what was that special about Ayodhya? So my attempt was to educate, or to even educate myself. Why am I saying educate the people? My attempt was that all the research that I had known, all the little knowledge that I had, I wanted to put it in the form of a book and make it understandable for everybody. So if anybody doesn't know the book yet, then I'd like to tell them that everything written in the book is written with praman, and praman is proof. And what is the kind of proof that we can have today? It's most of it is visual, like pratyaksh praman, and then we have the proof that is shabdik praman, which is from the which are the shlokas from the Valmiki Ramayana. Now Valmiki Ramayana, why Valmiki Ramayana is the source, is because Valmiki is Adi Kavi. The word Adi means the first. So this is the first poetry written, and it describes very well the whole district of Ayodhya. So I took out information from there, from ASI records, numerous places, and I've tried to explain and compile it together so that anybody reading today has no questions in their mind about the glory of Ayodhya, the origin of Ayodhya, and all other details that you might want to find, including birds and animals in Ayodhya.
Right. Well, Neena, you have in fact answered what I was going to ask you next, is what actually inspired you to write Ayodhya. And that's because, you're such a young author yourself. And, I would think that why Ayodhya? Something as serious as Ayodhya, maybe you could have picked up another city. And, why? You're obviously an avid devotee of Lord Rama and Devi Sita yourself. So that obviously explains that, why it fascinated you. But, going through your book, I also found that, it's comprehensive research that's gone into your book. Ayodhya is definitely, your book is not just another book on Ayodhya. You've basically given the entire background and how you've given all the shlokas, like you said. And for people who cannot understand Sanskrit, you have given all the transliterations, like word by word. You've broken it up. So you've done all of that. So it's comprehensive research out there. So now my next question is, but often when you have to do that much of research, you're always thinking where to begin. Like I would be like, oh my God, there's so much I have to do. Where should I start? So how difficult it was, and take us through the entire process, the entire experience of how you started, because it's a lot of work to do.
So there are many questions in the question you asked me. Where did I begin and how was it? So it was very difficult, and I am not telling anybody that it was an easy route. One of the biggest challenges I had was that I could read a little bit of Sanskrit, and I was still learning Sanskrit. And even when I sat with my teachers, I had personal tutors. First, I studied Sanskrit in an institution, and then I sat with my teachers. And we would talk. So one of the first mysteries that I came, so there were certain things that they would immediately answer for me, and I had been struggling with it in my mind. Why does Valmiki say Ayodhya Puri? Why does he say then Ayodhya Nagri? Then he says Nagar, Nagri, Puri. Why does he do that? And it would keep playing in my mind. And so there were things that teachers did for me, which is like, I asked my Sanskrit teacher, why does he say Ayodhya Puri here? Why does he say Nagri here? And so he says, well, Puri means capital and Nagri is district. And I'm like, that's it. That's it. So he's, when he says about the Puri, that's the diplomatic area, the capital district, that's where all the king and his men stay. And the district is, let's say, if I live in South Delhi, so Chanakya Puri is the capital district. And, even though we're in the capital and, the rest of us are in the suburbs, so to say, And so, they made it very easy for me. And then there were some things that they couldn't make it easy for me. So this was very difficult. So one of the things that I remember reading about Ayodhya is that the roads of Ayodhya, all the roads of Ayodhya, they had flowers on it. So they used to put flowers on it, and all the time they used to keep it wet. They used to sprinkle water on it. So I asked my sir, so there is a particular word for sprinkling water, right? So sincha jata tha pani se. So I said, this must be a mammoth task. And I said, now tell me, did people do it, or did they have pipes to do it? Like फवारे से होता था इसका सिंचाई कि लोग करते थे? And at that point, sir was like, now this is a difficult question because this line doesn't say who does it. So then I had to research, and you see, now I'm lost. Even my sir doesn't know. So then I had to start researching. Then it turns out that till recently, people, there are actually bhishtis. They are called bhishtis, and I have given all of this in my book. And specifically, if anybody is at all curious, they can take a look at the design of Ayodhya and the road and the roadways of Ayodhya. So there are people called bhishtis. So this is a picture of a bhishti, and in ancient times they used to do the sinchai. So till today, there are certain areas in Delhi where bhishtis are used. So and the original word for a bhishti is vrishtikar. Vrishtikar is a rainmaker. Vrishti is rain, and Vrishtikar is a rainmaker, or a person who does rain. So imagine the beautiful streets of Ayodhya. So these are things that I got stuck on. And then there were Sanskrit words that I was stuck on, wherein the meanings did not come through. So in this portion, so I'm getting very technical. So these are tough parts, easy and tough parts. And one tough part that I was really stuck at was about the birds of Ayodhya. I was not able to decipher one of the birds of Ayodhya, and that bird took me to Antarctica.
I'm going to come to that. Let's leave it for the
The
further
next.
part. Right.
So these were the tough things that I had to face. And you said, well, how did I know where to begin? So, one of the questions that I asked myself was, I live in this house. Somebody built this house, some person, you know. And then I live in Delhi. Somebody decided that they needed a city called Delhi, Indraprasth, let's say. Indraprasth is the ancient, older. Now, because the Mahabharata is closer to us, so we recognize that, it was the Pandavas that had made Indraprasth. So my first search was the antiquity of Ayodhya. Like, how antique is it? And who put the seed for Ayodhya? And when was the seed put? And so we've lost that information in the dust of time. And it's fascinating how ancient Ayodhya is. And I've given all the details in the book. So this
That's
is
right.
where I decided to start from. This is why my book starts from there.
Right. Also, so now when you're trying to articulate, like I see how, like I said before, you've broken down the shlokas, and it's obviously been difficult, like the etymology, for example, of breaking down words. And, we see how English is not such a simplified language, because, just as an example, that an auntie and like an auntie is your bua also, and your auntie is your masi also, unlike Hindi is, where you have a specific word for a specific term when you want to say. So what was, and I see how difficult it is for you to articulate your thoughts throughout the book. So which was, how difficult was it? Like, which part was the most difficult for you, wherein you were like, okay, I'm just not getting the right word to put it across? Was it anything specific that you thought was very difficult to articulate?
Yeah, so at many places I had a lot of difficulty in articulating. So, for example, there were a lot of similes used. So, whenever we speak of shloks, so there are lots of similes that are used, right? Now, there is this lovely shlok wherein, Valmiki ji says, and Dashrath ruled Ayodhya like the sun rules over the nakshatras. And then he uses certain terms, and then he says, by appeasing, vanquishing, and he uses certain terms which the English equivalent somehow did not match. So that was one difficult portion. So basically, it said that he went into Sam Dam Dand Bhed. Okay.
Right.
So it's like you have a conversation. So Sam Dam Dand Bhed, and those who didn't listen, he vanquished them, vanquished his enemies, and he ruled like the moon over the nakshatras. The nakshatras are the stars, so the moon is the biggest. So he was the biggest ruler on this earth. So there were these difficulties that I came across. Then the most difficult portion, the word that I was feeling a bit trapped in, is in the section birds of Ayodhya. So this took me a very long time because there was a bird called cronch. Now, when I looked at the diction, so I would try and verify my words and my facts as much as I could. Now, this cronch bird is found in the palaces of Ayodhya. That includes the palaces of Bhagwan Ram and and Kekeji, and so there's Hans, Saras, cronch. These are the mentions of the birds that are there. Now, there is a very famous book of Sanskrit, and it's called Birds in Sanskrit Literature. Now, when I looked the cronch in Birds in Sanskrit Literature, he took another name, and then the English translations and the Hindi translations gave me another name. So that was very difficult for me to decide who's saying the right thing. And then it depended on me, what was I going to talk about that. So I thought about it, मैं क्या लिखूं, because you see, I can't give them wrong information. Like for me, it is like I can't give people wrong information. I can give it to the extent that my mind allows me, or I can only talk till my IQ level allows me to, right? My intelligence and my understanding allows me to. And then I said, I'm now stuck in this predicament. What the hell do I do? And so I then remembered that there are 7 continents according to Hindu cosmology, and one of the continents, Dweep, is Cronch Dweep. So I said, now if I can figure out, and it took me months to get to this conclusion, by the way. It sounds very easy because it's been solved. So I said, why don't I figure out? And people haven't really figured out which are these continents that are being spoken about. So had they done, I would have just Googled which continent is Cronch Dweep and gone there and seen it. So I then went on to the maps, the world maps, and I started looking at each continent to see which continent looks like a bird. So there is the Antarctica, and here are the pictures of Antarctica. And you can see that this looks like a bird. And in the next page, I have the other bird, cronch. Now, I was stuck between a saras and a cronch, and it made it very easy for me that which bird is sitting there. So I've given the pictures. So this is how, I have taken the reader through a little journey with me, that this is how it is confirmed that this is a cronch, because Antarctica looks like actually a sitting cronch. And another thing that fascinated me is that the Valmiki Ramayana is written, I mean, we don't know how antique the Valmiki Ramayana is, right? The present day Ayodhya, it's around, it's in some BC, right? And apparently the so-called discovery of Antarctica happened in the 19th century, and it actually it was discovered in 1820. So we're talking of thousands of years ago. Hindus had the capability to see Earth from an aerial level, to be able to understand that there is a dweep called Cronch Dweep.
I'll in
And it
fact be
is
coming to that, right?
okay,
So yes, I mean, of course, like you've, in a way, you've answered everything that I wanted to ask you.
please ask
But
again.
yeah, I mean, let's no, but of course, so coming to that part. There are several revelations across the book. For example, you have a chapter on the vimans, the 5 type of vimans that Ayodhya had. And I mean, for a reader, it's mind blowing that technology. Who would have thought of it? Like thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, they had all that technology. So, how did you get to that part? Like, share your experience writing that part.
So when I did the Cronch Dweep thing, it was very clear that no, you can't see what Antarctica is like unless you are in an aerial vehicle, an aerial chariot or an aerial vehicle. You just cannot, because you can't, you maybe you'll be able to map it, but the fact that it is within a ocean of curd, or ocean, it's curd, right? So when I actually started looking at various aerial pictures of the Kronch Dweep or Antarctica, I started seeing those crumbling ice blocks. They actually look like it's yogurt that's crumbling, or a curd that's crumbling, the way we set it in our homes, right? So this could not have happened if there was no way to cruise over Antarctica. So somebody thousands of years ago cruised over Antarctica and said, this is the description. And a lot of people take it literally, ki wahan dahi ka samudra hai, ki, that there is an ocean of yogurt or curd there. No, what they're talking about is visually. What do you see visually? So you can see the bird visually, and the bird is sitting in an ocean that looks like yogurt, curd, that, that is there. Then obviously there were aeroplanes, some kind of flying vehicles were there. Then Valmiki earlier says that the houses of Ayodhya are like vimans that have been obtained by the siddhas. Okay, so he speaks of it, and there are other places also wherein Sita talks about the vimans. Sita talks about, she's not one. I don't want to get into what she says to Ram and all of that, but apparently women used to go for joy rides in these vimans as well. So there are these little mentions here and there, and I said, okay, so which are the vimans and what are the houses like that look like vimans? So then I did a whole search. Turns out that there are actual chariots that are made in shapes of vimans. So these are very typical viman shapes. This is a very typical viman shape. And then I gave, and Vishnu's chariot, and so these are also viman. This is also ancient viman. Now these are just drawings, and then and then I researched which were the original viman and what were they used for. So it turns out that it was Brahma, and this is all given. The sources that I have taken this research from is also given. And so Brahma had created the 5 original Vimans and given it to the particular gods, as we say. And those, they're all written here, by the way. So the 5 original Vimans, and he's named them. I don't know whether they are the types or not, but he's named them. And for what did they need the Viman? This is the most interesting part. So they needed it to traverse darkness. Now you'd ask, what do you mean by traverse darkness? So most people don't realize is we have the sun here in the solar system, but if you go beyond, if you go out of Earth, if you go beyond, there's only darkness in space. So Akash is darkness. So it is to traverse darkness. So, this is how specific they are. And so obviously it is interstellar travel. So, to us, this is already written. We are thinking of this, this sounds like fiction. This sounds as exotic as ancient aliens, right? So anybody who's interested in that would be very fascinated by the kind of information that's given there. And one of the things that I remembered that I have to take this very seriously is because thousands of years ago, when the Valmiki Ramayana was written, we have to remember Valmiki ji was not thinking of impressing Neena Rai and Samriddhi Goyal and the people of 2022. Valmiki ji was writing what he was observing. Valmiki ji was writing of what was happening. Valmiki ji was writing of what he was seeing. Valmiki ji, the human behavior per se hasn't changed, but then the whole world has changed. So I tried to capture as much of that fascination and Ayodhya in this book that I could.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing with us that the whole story about the Viman. Now, coming next, you've also spoken about ancient cities that were designed and planned, in that rectangular shape. The Dholavira, for example, the ancient WHS design, the grid pattern, the layout that was used, and now this whole design is now being used by New York and Abu Dhabi. In like today's times, they're copying all that design. So tell us more about that.
So when I went into the architecture of Ayodhya and how ancient town planning was done in India, I was very, very surprised. Now, and I had to study a little bit of Vastu Shastra for that as well. And you'd be surprised that everything in Ayodhya and everything in Dholavira is designed according to Vastu. Now, the Ayodhya was a military town, and that is why it is called Ayodhya. जहां पे युद्ध नहीं होता है, जिससे आप लड़ नहीं सकते हैं, that which is unassailable, that which is unconquerable. There was no spiritual principle here. The principle was pretty simple. That was military might, military strategy, military design on how to protect its people who are living in
The
there,
four
right?
corners, like you have spoken about.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Ayodhya had a rectangular shape. This is the most auspicious shape that you could get. It was in, and then it was surrounded by a moat of water, which is the Saryu River. Similarly, this is what Dholavira's shape was. Dholavira is slightly different, but Dholavira also has the rectangular shape, and Dholavira is given on page 59. So if you can see this is Dholavira's shape. And according to the mappers, this is the grid pattern of Ayodhya. So you see the similarities here, right? And this happens because they were following Vastu Shastra to the T. The innermost portion is Garbhgriha, and you'd be surprised to know that the concept of Garbhgriha was pretty much dominant even across the world. So I remember I was in Peru and I went to Cusco, and there they used to have the Garbhagriha, which they would go round and round during the new year, because it was supposed to bring them luck or auspiciousness. And it's the same thing that we do around our temples and our deities. So I was very surprised that most ancient cultures kept this together. And the grid pattern is something that somehow we seem to have forgotten. Our own ancient genius is something that seem to have forgotten, but the rest of the world is doing it. The whole of New York is on a grid pattern. Abu Dhabi and Dubai are on grid patterns. Chandigarh is also on a grid pattern. There are various cities that are on grid patterns. And in ancient past, this was a city designed by the Kshatriya. So this is a very typical Kshatriya concept, because inside you had the grid pattern so that the army could go, the king could go to the ends of the district, and then they had a moat for protection. Then they had a further protection of forests. Now, Dholavira, you'd be surprised. And why I mentioned Dholavira is because Dholavira is one of the most ancient excavated sites, right? And it's an ASI, it's a heritage site, it's ASI, all of that, right? The word for Dhola, the Sanskrit word for Dholavira is Dhaval Vira, Dhaval Veer. Dhaval Viraha. Dhaval in Sanskrit means white. And why is it white? Because everything around there is white because of the salt and the sand. So Dhaval, white, Veer, the brave as in the Kshatriyas. So so that is a city that was started with the Kshatriyas of who settled in Dhaval. And this is again Ayodhya. So why I'm saying this is because the design of Ayodhya was like this, which was most likely copied by the Dhaval Viraha. Veer is again like the Kshatriyas, and so this was a very typical designs that the Kshatriyas would use to build their fortified cities.
Right. Well, now I mean, it's amazing how you broke down Dholavira for us. That also reminds me that I have to ask you how man came actually from Manu. You are exceptional at that cohesive linking that you do of making that bridge in between how these words have actually come. So tell us, share with our viewers more on that.
So one of the things that I have repeatedly said in my book is that, I discuss it. The Hindus are the only indigenous people on this earth who are not in a museum, right? Every other ancient culture, Egyptians, Peruvians, the Mayans, the Incans, you name the culture, they're in a museum today. Okay. The Hindus are pretty much one of the last bastions of indigenous civilizations that are holding onto their own, their own culture, and they haven't yet been decimated. So wherever Abrahamism came, Abrahamics came, the cultures were decimated. Now all the Abrahamic faiths go to Noah, the great flood and the Noah. Guess what? Where is it copied from? It is copied from Hindu scriptures, which talk of the great flood, the Pralay. And in Pralay, there is a man called Manu, and Manu is a title. The progenitor of the human species is called Manu. It's a title, like the president of India is a title, the prime minister of India is a title. People keep changing, the title is given to them. Now, turns out that the English word man is derived from the word manav, and manav is derived from Manu. The progeny of Manu are called manav. What belongs, so shashti vibhakti, I don't want to get into the grammar of it. So Manu ki shashti vibhakti manav hota hai, which means that which is of Manu, so humans, the progeny, the children. And we call ourselves Manav. And this is how, even in English, the word man is from Manu. So the whole of the humankind, which is, so today we only have Homo sapiens. We can't talk of other, Homo erectus and all of that. So the people today, we owe our beginning to Manu, or to the survival, the thriving, because when the Pralay came, everything got decimated. And so in etymology, so what I did was I took proof from various places. So the word, this comes under etymology. The word man is derived from the word Manu. So and I've just said we are the most ancient. Even the words that they use to describe their own comes from our Sanskrit words. So this basically puts us as the most ancient. So what is being said in the Valmiki Ramayana and what I've written in Ayodhya, then, I mean, how much more proof do I give to people for them to understand the significance of Ayodhya? Because it is Manu who established Ayodhya after the Pralay. So he made it his capital. And then the heir to that capital, the heir to the throne of humans, the progenitor of, the protector of the human race, went to Ikshvaku. And in the line of Ikshvaku came Bhagwan Ram. So they're all of them are the protectors of the human race, which we take for granted today. We are thriving, so we're like, everything's cool. Nobody really helped us. But how we survived, if you read their stories, it's amazing.
Right. So your book definitely has like plenty of examples of what fascinated me as a reader, because, of course, we've been listening to Ramayana since our childhood, and, Hindu families, we definitely know the basic storyline. But yeah, I mean, going through the book, there were several instances where I was like, wow, I didn't know this. Wow, I didn't know this. I mean, this is fascinating. And like, some of the examples like you brought up of how Antarctica is actually named after the bird, and after the story of the Vimans, or for example the architecture. But which was your favorite part in the book, which fascinated you the most, or like a fact that you thought, oh my god, I have to share this, I have to put it out there because this is like totally mind-blowing, I didn't know this. What is your favorite part from the book?
So my favorite part from the book was the research, because you see what happens is that when you're researching something, it is at the back of your mind, and it's like eats you like this. It just keeps gnawing at you. What was this? Why wasn't this done? How did they do this? So my favorite part was discovering Antarctica as the Cronch Dweep. So that's one of, because that just kept in my mind months and months. And then for many days I just sat and I just took all the notes of all the islands that were mentioned, the continents that were mentioned, and I said one of them has to be that Cronch. Why is it being called Cronch, right? So when I went and I said, visually they said exactly how it was supposed to look. And it impressed me so much that thousands of years ago, somebody saw something and they described it to such an extent that Neena Rai, sitting in 2020, 2022, 21, I released my book. 2000, I mean, this is 2000 CE. Before that, thousands of years ago. Like, for example, I'll give you an example of, the fossils in the Ram Setu. So I read this research about how old are the fossils in the Ram Setu. So I think they're around 18,000 years old. So somebody did a fossil study, found that it was 18,000 years old, right? And so I thought to myself for a minute that the dating people, they're going to 3000 BC, 7000 BC, all of that. And I thought to myself, if Ram Setu is 18,000 years, the fossil of Ram Setu is 18,000 years old. I said, let's assume this was 20,000 years ago. I said 20,000 years ago, if Valmiki wrote this, if any, all these Hindus who studied this, they wrote it in such a manner that somebody who came 18,000 years later, somebody like me, could know exactly what they're talking about. So I was very impressed by the precise mention of these facts. So this fascinated me, that I can today sit and understand what was written 20,000 years ago. This portion fascinated me, and the other portion that fascinated me was the fact that how much care was taken to make Ayodhya beautiful and to have the houses like the vimans of the gods. We call them gods. They're not technically gods. They're devis and devatas. They're another being of people. Like we are human beings, they're devi and devata beings, right? It's just that English vocabulary is lacking, so we call them gods. So they're just a level ahead of us in evolution. So the roads and the gold plating of the houses, and even today we still gold plate our temples. And why did we do that? We did that because gold plating is what the devis and devtas used to do for their own interstellar travel vehicles. So I was amazed at how we're still copying it. And then when I did a research on gold, turns out that gold actually doesn't belong to earth. Gold is not something that is made, like, unlike coal and diamond, which is, they are compressed and made in earth. Gold is actually available in the universe, and when earth was being formed, gold got embedded in earth. So we have a limited quantity of gold. So that means that it is true that, and that is a metal that doesn't lose luster. Gold, as it doesn't get tarnished, like for example copper gets tarnished, it turns green, and other, like iron will rust, right? Now gold doesn't get tarnished. So these were these facts that totally, absolutely, during the time of my research, they fascinated me. Imagine the gods and goddesses, and they're not lying, right, that the gods and goddesses had gold plated vimans. And I'm like, is gold available in space? Turns out gold is only in space. Earth doesn't make gold. It got
Wow.
embedded when earth was being formed. So they're speaking the truth, right? And understand this, they are not saying it to impress us. 18,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, they did not know that you and I will be sitting and discussing it. We're fascinated today because we've lost the link, right? They did it because they saw what was happening, not to impress us.
That's right. So apart from what fascinated you, looking at the style of writing, when I see your book, it's not like a regular novel. It's as a compliment, I would say it's more like a very, very simplified textbook of facts that you've written, and you've written it in such a way that I think even the youth, the younger lot, it's very easy for them to understand. Like, for example, like I said, you've broken down the shlokas. You've made it very, very easy for them to comprehend. So did you have that in mind? Did you have that audience in mind when you were writing the book?
Yes, absolutely. I had that in mind. I had two or three things in mind. I wanted the book to be so simple in English that a person, that even a Hindi bhashi would be able to understand. And the best compliment was given to my, and so I knew that I did that because when I gave it to my nani to read, now my nani is not, she's very fluent in Hindi, but she has trouble understanding, trouble reading English. Right, so she said to me that हम इंग्लिश की तो पढ़ते नहीं है उतनी पुस्तक, पर हमने तुम्हारी पुस्तक पढ़ी तो हमें तो बहुत आनंद से समझ में आ गया. So that was a big compliment, because
Compliment. That's right.
she doesn't studying. I mean, she is educated in English, but she's not fluent because she grew up studying Hindi. So I wanted it to be like this, because I wanted the people who are not very fluent with English to be able to read this book and to be able to comprehend this book. And also young children. So one of the things that young children have, that their vocabulary is still limited, right? And they don't understand concepts and certain facts very well. So that's why I have given all the pictures
The
to help,
pictures.
right? So it really helps people. So if I'm saying that it is a rectangular city with a moat, I've given a picture of, let's say, Angkor Wat, which is again built on the same principle. So you can see there is a picture of a rectangular city with a moat. And so I have made it very easy for young children to be able to visually see what is being talked about and to understand. And then I've given the reasoning why it has been done. So why, it was then a military city, and this is how you stop the soldiers from coming. And then I later in the chapters explain what were the military, what was the military might like. So this is done on purpose, and it is done on purpose so that it maximum number of people can understand it very well.
Right. So that also brings me to ask you now that what is an advice, what is a message that you would like to give to young authors who would like to write in the same genre or the same style of writing. So is there something from your experience that you'd like to share over there and say, okay, look, I did this mistake, so maybe this is something that you can avoid if you want to write in the same genre. You can start your research like this. So what is the advice that you'd like to give to young authors?
So one of the so I do a lot of authors ask me privately as well the same questions that you're asking. So my first advice is that you should have your facts correct. So facts have to be correct, and there are many ways to validate those facts. So for example, one validation of fact would be, let's say, we don't have the exact map of Ayodhya, but we have the exact map of Dholavira. We have the exact map of Angkor Wat. So I'm going to present Angkor Wat and Dholavira. There's another fascinating fact wherein they say in Ayodhya that they used to import horses from nearby places. And amongst horses, there's a word that is for hippopotamus. So they used to import hippopotamuses, right? So why would they import hippopotamuses? So then I looked at ancient cultures who revered hippopotamuses. So we had Egypt, and then we had others. And I said, okay, that's Egypt. Can we find any hippopotamus fossil? Because there must be hippopotamus fossil near Ayodhya if there were hippopotamuses in Ayodhya. And lo and behold, that in Narmada River Valley, they have found the hippopotamus fossils. So that means that what they're saying is correct, right? So this is how I verified my facts. So if there's a shlok that I took out from the Valmiki Ramayana, I looked at it very carefully, and then I said, okay, hippopotamus is being imported. Where is the proof for that hippopotamus? There you go. This is how I present my data. Then something like that the houses were gold plated in Ayodhya. Okay, so the houses are made like the vimans of the gods. So let's read about the vimans of the gods. What were they used for? What were they like? And what is it? Why did they do that? And then they were gold plated. What do we have today that is gold plated? And I was telling my mother that they used to have the gold plating done, and she says, yeah, of course we even have them today. Look at Golden Temple, look at this, we plate them with gold, don't we, even today? And I said, of course, we have so many temples that are gold plated, right? And then of course I had been to the Peru, and the Incan civilization, they had gold plating on their walls. I mean, I've seen those gold plates with my own eyes, gold and silver. And this, when the Spanish invaded them, they took off all the gold and silver, they melted it, and they made it into bricks, and then they transported it to Spain. And so they totally destroyed the culture. But gold plating on walls was done all over the world at that time. So these are the kind of examples that I would highly recommend, that if you're going to say something, then you prove it, and then you show it in pictures, in facts, And this is something I'd highly recommend people to do. And when I was doing this book, it sounded more like, is this, people are going to think this is fiction because it is so long ago that it almost seems like I'm talking fiction. No, but this is the truth of thousands of years ago. So, you have to keep verifying the facts. And these are two things. And if you can study Sanskrit, I highly recommend that you study Sanskrit, because the English translations are incorrect in many places.
That's right. So yeah, like she said, get your facts right, do your research well. Kunal, can we again have that question on our screens? I could see we have an audience question. No, we don't know who this is from, but the member says, was Kosala Des, whose capital was Ayodhya, a prosperous kingdom? Of course it was. Was Ram Rajya similar to the golden age of the Gupta kings? Any insights on that?
Yeah, so this is mentioned in my book as well, and you've already said the capital of Ayodhya. It was a very prosperous kingdom, and Ram Rajya is similar to the golden age of Gupta kings. I think Ram Rajya was better than the Gupta kings, because all the kings who came after, they were trying to copy Ram Rajya. So, for example, the South Indian Varma kings, if you see the names of all the kings, they're all named after Ram, all the kings. So if you notice the names of these kings as well, they try and name it after Ram or somebody in Ram's family. So everybody is trying to mimic Ram Rajya. So this is the opposite example. And another thing I'd like to say, and this is written in my book as well, in the portion of this is chapter 9, was Kosal kingdom a kingdom or an empire? And the other thing is, how many kings, the other chapter is chapter 10, how many kings are under Dashrath's dominion. So what do I mean by how many kings were under Dashrath's dominion? So the largest empire that the Western world has seen, or that is very popular, is the Roman Empire. Now, the concept of the Roman Empire predates the Roman Empire. So, they used to have things like provinces, and these provinces are the samants in Hindu kingdoms. And so the Roman Empire was actually fashioned on the way the ancient Hindu kingdoms used to work, specifically the Kosal kingdom, because they used to, the way they collected taxes, the way they had the concept of a Maharaj, the way they had a concept of a Raja. So these are things that are given in detail in the book. So, it really helped you to, if you read that, you'd be able to get more information.
Wow. So we are also getting another question which says, why do you think our itihas and puranas are called mythology? They are not a figment of someone's imagination, of course. They have happened in Treta Yuga. So your
So
comment on that.
I have a YouTube channel where I've exactly answered this question. When did it become mythology? So there are many reasons why it became mythology. And if you're listening, then do go to my YouTube channel, and there's one question I've answered. When did itihas become mythology? So we must understand that one of the things that the discoveries have been written. So, for example, in 18 something, Antarctica was discovered, but Hindus have known of Antarctica so long back. America was discovered by XYZ. India was discovered by XYZ in certain century. So one of the things that they did was, anything that was before the birth of Christ was seen as unexplored, unknown, and nothing. Anything that came after Christ, so they went on explorations around the world. So they ignored it. They said history only began from the time Jesus was born. Right? So this is a concept that we've had to deal with, and everything then had to be noted after that. This is why America was discovered, discovery of India, discovery of Antarctica, wherein we already have the proof. I mean, the fact that we've read about gravitation for thousands of years, then in the 15th 16th century they are still trying to discover gravitation, then Newton comes and all of that. These are very recent discoveries. It's not that they have discovered it, we already had it discovered. So because in their education and in their mindset, they were told an X amount of things. Let's say if somebody keeps telling you earth is flat, and somebody says, well, earth is not flat, you're going to be called a liar. So what happens is that when a group of people is repeatedly told that we have discovered, the other group becomes a liar. So this is one reason, right? So they couldn't understand the depth of the Hindu civilizations and how ancient we were. And so this is why, one, they called it mythology, and the word mythology stems from mithya, which means lies, right? Satya and mithya. The other reason is that we have way too many versions. We've given too much liberty to anybody to come and rewrite our epics. This is the second reason why they started calling it mythology, is because
Mythology.
they were like, which version do we believe in? So and so any researcher then only writes about Valmiki Ramayana because the truth is only there in no other version. So I hope that answers your question in absolute detail.
That's right. Now we also have another question from the audience, and this person wants to know that since Ram Mandir is being built by the Modi government in Ayodhya, have you met the Yogi government and share your comments on the coming up of the, share your comments on the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya? Do you
Well,
want to
I
comment on that?
haven't. Well, it's very good that they're making it. They're making great progress in Ayodhya. I haven't met Mr. Yogi. I know people in his, the government, the UP government, and all. And in fact, the tourism department is the one that gave me the pictures for my book. So I had to write to them to give me a picture. So they were very kind enough to give me this picture. So they are, and so my comments on the upcoming Ram Mandir, I'm very happy, I'm very excited. At least that the city that we speak of and all of that, it's getting a name, and I'm very happy that the Koreans are also, they have also invested money in Ayodhya. And this is regards their ancestors from Ayodhya. I don't know if you know that the Koreans, around I think quite a few million Koreans, they trace their lineage to one of the queens of Ayodhya, and her name was Suri Ratna, Queen Suri Ratna, or Princess Suri Ratna, who went and married a Korean king. And so Koreans are half brothers and sisters of ours from the maternal side.
Wow,
Especially
that's interesting.
yeah, especially the UP walas, they can rejoice. Ayodhya Vasis especially.
Right. And how many months did it take you to complete the book? I would have asked how much time for the research because it's comprehensive and it's thorough. I'm sure it took you a lot of time.
Yeah, so it took me 5 years. So
Okay.
in that, I also had to learn Sanskrit. Bear in mind that I had to learn Sanskrit because it was very difficult for me to just copy English and then say, okay, this is what it means, because it was totally twisting it. So for me to tell people what I was doing, I had to first study Sanskrit and know exactly what was being spoken about.
Right. And one of our reader has complained that you've priced it pretty low, although it deserves much more than what it deserves. Any reason for that?
Yeah, that is to enable a higher so this the prices are actually put by the publisher. So this is the price decided by the publisher so that people find it affordable to buy. So my research is, of course, years of research. Books do not ever justify it. So if you think it is at a lower price, you can go to my a YouTube channel and give me a donation for my hard work there.
Okay, so one last question I think I can take from the audience and we'll have to wrap it up. We have taken secularism to a ludicrous level that even our Lord Ram, the very soul of Bharat, has been subjected to this harrowing ignominy. Your take on that, Neena Jee?
I agree with that. We have taken secularism to ludicrous levels that talking about Bhagwan Ram is seen as backward. Talking about, so for example, I mean, there are various memes made on it. And one of the memes that I came across, and I know that this is true for us, is that, oh, a good Christian goes to church and practices Christianity. A good Muslim goes to the mosque, wears his, the clothes that he wears, but a good Hindu is a Hindu who doesn't believe in anything. So a good Hindu is basically a bin pendi ka lota. He's secular, he goes everywhere, and he has no identity. And this is ludicrous. And talking of Bhagwan Ram is like, you're either a militant, you're backward, or you're crazy. And this is something that I had personally faced a lot of times when I would tell them. So they would look at me, they'd like, you as a girl, and you talk of Ram, and you lived abroad, and you worked abroad. Why would you waste your time? So for them, it was like a waste of time. Anything to do with culture was a waste of time. They'd be like, you're too modern to write about that. You shouldn't be. You should talk of gender issues. So everybody, especially the men, they felt very entitled to give me their opinion on what I should or should not be doing in this country, which I found very, very funny. They were like, but why, and I would keep getting these questions. Why? Surprisingly, the women never asked me. They were like, yeah, good work, I'm so proud of you, you're somebody's working on our culture. So I agree with that. Secularism has been taken to ludicrous levels.
Right, now we have another question coming in. I'm afraid we are less in time. So, okay, this can be like the final question. It's a pity that Maryaada Purushottam Ram had to fight a rather protracted battle to claim his birthplace, and that was almost 400 years ago. Your take on that? It's more like a repetition, but your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. It's a pity. It's an absolute pity. And who do I blame on it? I would say, why couldn't you fight and reclaim it back? What stopped you from fighting and reclaiming it back? Why did we have to go to court? This could have been done in 16th century, 17th century, 18th century. Why did you not do it? This is a question that the men have to answer for themselves. This is a question that the men have to think and understand and know. There were a few tries to do that, but then they didn't do that. And there were villages around Ayodhya that they stopped wearing their pagris. And pagri is a what do you say, a title, or like a symbol of honor, right? Wearing, and this is a question that Hindu men have to ask themselves and figure out, why did they not do that? And there is a lot of temple breaking happening even today. So this is a question that I would like to ask them. I totally agree, it's a pity, it's an absolute pity. And what was worse was that so-called leaders of Hindus, they started propagating the concept of ahimsa, when if you see that if you read our scriptures, ahimsa is the worst thing to follow when crime is being committed on you. So a lot of people, they converted cowardice and into ahimsa, and they propagated it as if it was the main value system. And I'm not only talking of the main person that who did this. There are even people who did this before. So one of the things that I would want to warn you about is that you should have your own relationship with Bhagwan Ram or Krishna and know what their teaching is, rather than to hear it from a fraudulent guru. And we have a lot of them, by the way, absolute frauds. And since a lot of times you've had these from fraudulent gurus who either are trying to push their courses or push their strange thought processes in saying that this is what they did and this is not what they did. Ram, to protect his wife, fought a battle all the way to Sri Lanka, right? Krishna made the Pandavas to fight a battle for what was rightfully theirs.
Right.
So take it from them, and please, kind of drop the ahimsa propagations. It's a pity.
Right. Well, one final question. This is, I'm just taking a liberty as the moderator here. This is, who are your favorite authors? As a young reader, who do you follow? And even when you were writing this book, just to get an inspiration on on the style of writing, who are your favorite authors there?
So, my style of writing, I didn't see many people do that. No, and especially in India, by the way. I am one of the first, I don't want to say I'm one of the first, but I didn't see anybody putting so many pictures. I didn't see anybody putting, the maps. I didn't see anybody putting, shloks and, giving their translations, and even correcting translations where it was required, and even correcting the grammar. I didn't see many people doing it. So I thought that this is the way that we need to educate our people today, because I have myself been educated in English, and so Hindi is here behind, and then Sanskrit is somewhere now. It's even out of the memory of our people. So it was very difficult. Now you ask me who inspired me. So I started reading these books, ancient books on, books on ancient cultures. And I remember I was very young. I read this book called The Chariots of the Gods. As a child when I read it, and I was so young. The countries he was naming, I couldn't name them on the map. I couldn't find them on the map. This is how young I was. But I was absolutely fascinated. I said, what is he talking about? He's talking about people coming in chariots of the gods, like spacecrafts and stuff. So I was absolutely fascinated. Then I read more of his books. I read books like Supernatural. I read books of different cultures that speak of, the gods coming and telling them where they come from, what is it like. And they're so, I mean, Hindus are not the only ones who talk of, of course, in English, they use the word gods, but they're actually Devis and Devtas, right? So they talk of that. And I was fascinated. And so I wanted to write. I wanted to write in a manner that I could explain. So in those books, what they had done was they had explained the past very well. What happened. They give pictures, and then so I wanted to write in a same fashion that and of course theirs is, or again, they are oral traditions. We used to be an oral tradition as well, right? So I was absolutely fascinated, and I said, for me, I'm going to write it for the Hindus today, and I'm going to give them the shlok, the praman, with the praman. So shloks, the visuals, and I wanted to decode ancient stuff, because this is something that people don't understand. So what happens is that when you start getting a very specific and niche knowledge, you can't explain it to people, because people are not at your level yet, because they haven't read the same things. And so it's like two foreigners talking to each other in terms of concepts, right? We may speak the same language, but they're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? No, 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 no. So I said, if I want to be able to converse with people, I need to bring them up to my level. So let's share my knowledge on Ayodhya, make it a book. And then we can so that becomes a stepping stone. And then we can go further and further and, exploring our own past. So,
well,
yeah.
thank you, Neena. You've definitely done a fabulous job on writing this book and, sharing all that knowledge, like you said, with all of us. I'm afraid this is the only time, this is all the time we have on Delhi Literature Festival. I'm sure most of our audiences have got the answers to whatever they wanted to ask. Of course, nevertheless, you can always post your questions, and we can post them to Neena Jee, and then I'm sure she can answer those for you. So thank you once again, Neena Jee, for being here, spending your time and sharing with us about your book. If you haven't read this book before, Ayodhya it is. And like we said, not another book on Ayodhya, not another book on the controversy. There's so much more to Ayodhya than just the controversy, and then just being a Ram Janmabhoomi. There's a lot of significance that Ayodhya holds. So do get your copy. And thank you once again. Back to you, Meenu.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, Neena, just one little question, because I'm curious. I don't know whether Samriti has already asked you that. When did you start learning Sanskrit? At what age?
I started learning Sanskrit in 2015, 2016. I came back to India in 2013, sometime like that. And then I was busy with other things. So, and then I decided to study Sanskrit. So I first went and I got all the books from one of the sansthans. So still have them. And then I said, okay, I can't do them. And it was teach yourself Sanskrit, right? So I started teaching myself, and I said, I can't do this. This is very difficult. So then I joined.
Difficult language, yeah. So I was just,
Yes.
curious
So
to know.
then I joined Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. I did courses from there. Then I realized that the pace at which I was moving, the things that I wanted to do, I was way faster. And what happens then? What is wrong with Sanskrit teaching today is there's way too much emphasis on grammar, and I wanted etymology, because it's in etymology that I was getting stuck. So I had private tutors. So somewhere in 2015, 2016, I started studying Sanskrit. And that time when I started, I was 35, 36. So that's many years ago now.
An insightful discussion that touched on strategic and thoughtful aspects of the subject. And all your viewpoints are well conceived and crafted on both angles, that you showed our viewers about that era through your explanation and pictures with which they could see. They have to buy the book for that. And thank you so much, Samriddhi and Neena, for this session. Those who
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
haven't
much.
read the book, please go and grab your copies.
Thank you so
All the
much.
society, country, and the world should try to live like Ayodhya and Ram. They are an example of how to live. Ramayana and Ayodhya are stories that people read about. People who read about them think of Rama as part of their lives. And once you do that, you can never be down on that person. Ram tells people how to live, makes life more interesting, and so is Ayodhya.
Thank you.